For more than a century, the public imagination pictured dinosaurs as enormous reptiles. The first skeletons were reconstructed in the 19th century, long before modern biology understood metabolism, posture, or evolutionary relationships. Early scientists compared the bones to animals they already knew. The closest match seemed obvious. They resembled lizards and crocodiles, only scaled up to impossible size. Because of this, dinosaurs entered books and museums as cold, sluggish monsters dragging heavy tails across swampy ground. That image survived for generations, but it began to collapse once paleontologists started examining the bones more carefully. The earliest hint came from posture. Lizards walk with their legs spread outward from their bodies. Their belly hangs close to the ground, and their movement is slow and side to side. Dinosaurs did not walk like that. Every articulated skeleton showed legs positioned directly beneath the body, forming vertical support columns similar to mammals and birds. The hip joints locked into sockets that allowed efficient forward motion rather than sprawling movement. This single anatomical feature suggested a fundamental difference in lifestyle. An animal built to hold itself upright is built to move constantly, not to lie in mud waiting for prey. The second clue came from the hip bones themselves. When scientists sorted dinosaur fossils, they noticed two major hip arrangements. One resembled reptiles superficially and was named the lizard-hipped group. The other looked strikingly similar to modern birds and became known as the bird-hipped group. At the time, this was treated as coincidence because birds were assumed to be unrelated small animals that evolved much later. The naming would eventually become one of the greatest ironies in science. Birds did not evolve from the bird-hipped dinosaurs. They evolved from the so-called lizard-hipped theropods. The categories were misleading, but they revealed something profound. Dinosaurs were experimenting with body plans that paralleled bird anatomy tens of millions of years before birds appeared in the fossil record. Movement also revealed another contradiction with the reptile model. The muscle attachment scars on dinosaur bones were massive. The tail was not a dragging weight, but a balancing counterbalance. Running dinosaurs held the tail straight behind them, stabilizing the torso during motion. Computer simulations of skeletons showed stride lengths impossible for slow animals. Trackways, preserved in ancient sediment, confirmed it. Groups of dinosaurs moved at steady walking speeds comparable to modern mammals, and some ran. The spacing of footprints demonstrated momentum and rhythm, not clumsy wandering. A cold-blooded reptile could not maintain that level of sustained activity. Growth patterns added further evidence. When paleontologists cut thin sections of fossil bone and examined them under microscopes, they discovered growth rings similar to those found in trees. Reptiles grow slowly and continuously throughout life. Mammals and birds grow rapidly while young, then slow dramatically after maturity. Dinosaur bones matched the second pattern. Juveniles experienced explosive growth, sometimes gaining hundreds of kilograms per year. To support such growth, their bodies required a constant supply of energy. This pointed strongly toward warm-blooded metabolism. An animal dependent on external heat could never fuel that rate of development. Breathing anatomy told the same story. Many dinosaur skeletons contain hollow spaces inside the bones. At first, these were thought to simply reduce weight. Later analysis showed the cavities connected to a network of air sacs identical to those in modern birds. Birds do not breathe like mammals or reptiles. Air flows in one direction through their lungs, allowing continuous oxygen exchange during both inhalation and exhalation. This system is extremely efficient and supports intense activity such as flight. The presence of this system in non-flying dinosaurs indicated they were built for endurance and constant motion. Temperature regulation followed naturally from this discovery. Large, active animals produce heat internally. If dinosaurs were cold-blooded, their muscles would fatigue quickly and their brains would operate slowly. Yet predator skulls revealed large optic lobes and balance centers, suggesting active hunting lifestyles. Some species possessed forward-facing eyes, giving depth perception necessary for tracking moving prey. Others show herd behavior through synchronized footprints preserved across entire floodplains. Social movement demands awareness, coordination, and sustained awareness. The physiology of reptiles cannot maintain that level of neurological performance. The final shift came from evolutionary relationships. As more fossils were discovered, especially small theropods, scientists began noticing detailed similarities with birds beyond feathers. Wrist bones allowed folding arms in a way identical to wings. Collarbones fused into a structure matching the wishbone. Even eggshell microstructure was indistinguishable. Step by step, the supposed gap between dinosaurs and birds disappeared. Instead of reptiles giving rise to birds, birds were revealed as surviving dinosaurs. The extinction event did not eliminate the lineage. It only removed the large, non-avian forms. Once this realization took hold, the old picture became impossible to maintain. Dinosaurs were not oversized lizards inhabiting a primitive swamp world. They were dynamic terrestrial animals, occupying ecological roles similar to modern mammals and birds. Some grazed in herds across open landscapes. Others stalked prey with coordinated behavior. Many raised young in nests, guarding eggs and feeding hatchlings. Their biology demanded constant food intake, high oxygen consumption, and active lifestyles throughout the day. The word dinosaur itself began to mislead the public. It conjured images of scales, sluggishness, and primitive intelligence. In reality, these animals represented a highly successful branch of archosaurs that refined efficiency long before mammals dominated the land. They perfected upright posture, efficient lungs, and rapid growth tens of millions of years before similar strategies appeared in mammalian evolution. Reconstructing their appearance now requires abandoning familiar reptile imagery. Skin impressions show tight coverings rather than loose, scaly armor. Many species had insulating structures and display features. Muscles anchored to hips and tails created powerful locomotion systems capable of migration and pursuit. They occupied forests, plains, and deserts rather than endless swamps. The world they inhabited was complex and competitive, favoring energy and speed over lethargy. The transformation in understanding did not happen overnight. It required decades of anatomical comparison, microscopic analysis, and new fossil discoveries from around the world. Each piece of evidence alone might have been dismissed. Together, they forced a conclusion. The creatures once imagined as giant lizards were something entirely different. They were active, warm-blooded, bird-like animals that ruled terrestrial ecosystems not through size alone, but through advanced biological efficiency. By the late 20th century, museums began changing their displays. Tails lifted off the ground, limbs straightened, postures shifted from crouched to alert. The old swamp dioramas gave way to dynamic scenes of movement and interaction. This was not artistic choice, but scientific correction. The bones had always contained the truth, only interpretation had been wrong. Understanding dinosaurs requires letting go of the comfortable label of reptile. They belonged to a lineage that blurred categories and ultimately survives today. When a modern bird runs across pavement or launches into the air, it demonstrates the same anatomical principles that allowed its ancient relatives to dominate prehistoric continents. The difference is scale, not identity. The first misconception about dinosaurs, therefore, is also the deepest. They were never merely giant lizards. They were the precursors of birds, energetic animals whose biology was far closer to modern avian life than to the cold-blooded reptiles that once seemed their closest relatives. Once scientists accepted that dinosaurs stood upright and grew rapidly, the next question followed naturally. How active were they during their daily lives? Reptiles depend on the environment to regulate body temperature. They bask to warm up and retreat to shade to avoid overheating. Their activity occurs in short bursts. A crocodile can lunge with enormous power, but only briefly. Afterward, it must rest. If dinosaurs truly behaved the same way, their ecosystems would look very different from the complex fossil record that we actually find. Evidence from bone chemistry offered another window into their lives. The ratio of oxygen isotopes preserved inside fossil bones reflects internal body temperature. In cold-blooded animals, the temperature fluctuates with the surrounding climate, producing inconsistent values between different bones and individuals. In warm-blooded animals, the temperature remains stable, creating uniform readings. Measurements from multiple dinosaur species showed consistent internal temperatures across individuals of different ages and habitats. This implied internal heat production rather than environmental dependence. Predator and prey relationships also contradict the reptile model. In ecosystems dominated by cold-blooded predators, prey animals outnumber hunters by enormous margins because predators cannot hunt frequently. The fossil record of many dinosaur environments does not show that imbalance. Carnivorous species appear in proportions more similar to modern mammal-dominated ecosystems. This suggests predators hunted regularly and required constant food intake. Such energy demand aligns with warm-blooded metabolism rather than reptilian lethargy. Migration patterns further strengthen the argument. Some fossilized trackways extend for hundreds of kilometers across ancient floodplains. Herds traveled together through seasonal changes. Migration requires endurance and continuous muscle activity over long distances. Cold-blooded animals lack the aerobic capacity for sustained travel because their oxygen delivery system cannot maintain high performance for extended periods. Dinosaurs with bird-like air-sac lungs, however, could sustain movement day after day, much like modern caribou or wildebeest migrations. The brain structure preserved in endocasts also reshapes the picture. When sediment fills a skull and hardens, it forms a cast of the brain cavity. These endocasts reveal enlarged regions associated with vision and balance in many theropod dinosaurs. Depth perception depends on overlapping fields of view from forward-facing eyes. Several predatory species possessed this trait, indicating active tracking of moving prey rather than passive ambush behavior. Balance centers suggest rapid head movements and coordinated motion while running. Such neurological investment makes little sense in a slow animal that waits motionless for opportunity. Social behavior leaves its own signature in the rocks. Entire nesting grounds containing hundreds of eggs arranged in organized patterns have been discovered. The spacing between nests shows deliberate placement, preventing interference between neighboring parents. Some fossils preserve adults positioned over eggs in protective postures, limbs spread to cover the clutch. This brooding behavior mirrors modern birds and requires body heat to incubate developing embryos. A cold-blooded animal would not generate sufficient warmth to regulate egg development in this way. Young dinosaurs appear to have depended on adults after hatching. Bone beds containing multiple growth stages found together imply group living rather than solitary existence. The survival of small juveniles in open environments would require protection and learning. Herd behavior offers safety and information sharing. Coordinated groups must communicate visually or vocally, suggesting sensory awareness far beyond the traditional reptile stereotype. Even the sense of smell contributes to this revised understanding. Certain carnivorous dinosaurs possessed large olfactory bulbs relative to brain size. This allowed detection of prey over distance and possibly recognition of individuals. Combined with binocular vision, this created an animal capable of planning movement rather than reacting purely on instinct. Modern reptiles rely heavily on reflexive behavior patterns. Dinosaurs appear to have combined instinct with flexible responses shaped by experience. Feeding mechanics reinforce the same conclusion. Tooth-wear patterns show repeated use consistent with daily feeding rather than occasional feasting. Herbivorous species processed enormous quantities of plant matter, demanding near-constant foraging. Digesting fibrous vegetation requires fermentation chambers and steady internal temperatures. Without warm metabolism, microbial digestion would slow dramatically. Large plant-eating dinosaurs, therefore, functioned more like grazing mammals than basking reptiles. The structure of their limbs further reveals endurance capacity. Many species had long lower legs relative to thigh length, a design efficient for distance travel. Muscle attachment points suggest elastic tendons storing and releasing energy with each step. This reduces energy cost during locomotion, another trait associated with active animals that move frequently rather than rarely. Their skeletons resemble those of running birds more than those of sprawling reptiles. The idea of dinosaurs as swamp dwellers also fails under scrutiny. Sedimentary environments preserving their fossils include deserts, uplands, and seasonal plains. Footprints appear in dried mud surfaces exposed to air, not only in waterlogged ground. The old assumption that their weight required buoyancy from water came from misinterpreting posture. Once tails were recognized as balancing structures, the need for constant water support disappeared. They were land animals fully adapted to terrestrial life. Taken together, metabolism, growth, movement, behavior, and anatomy converge toward one consistent picture. Dinosaurs occupied ecological niches requiring continuous activity and high energy expenditure. They hunted, migrated, defended territory, raised offspring, and interacted socially. None of these patterns align with the biological limitations of large reptiles. This realization transforms the mental image of prehistoric Earth. Instead of silent marshes populated by sluggish giants, imagine landscapes filled with motion and sound. Herds traveling across plains, predators tracking from cover, parents guarding nests, juveniles learning from adults. The ecosystem functioned with the same complexity seen in modern savannas, only with different actors. The classification error of the 19th century lingered because external appearance seemed convincing. Scales, claws, and large teeth resembled reptiles superficially. But evolution often preserves outward similarity while altering inner function. Birds themselves illustrate this principle. Despite feathers and flight, they share deep ancestry with ground-running predators. Dinosaurs represent a stage in that continuum, not a separate experiment. By re-examining the bones through physiology rather than simple comparison, paleontology replaced a static vision with a dynamic one. The animals once portrayed as evolutionary dead ends now appear as highly specialized success stories whose descendants still thrive. Understanding them correctly requires discarding the comfortable label of giant lizard and accepting a more accurate description. They were active archosaurs with bird-like biology, dominating Earth through efficiency, adaptability, and sustained energy rather than brute size alone. For most of the 20th century, the skin of dinosaurs was imagined as thick reptilian armor. Museums displayed them with pebbled scales, and films reinforced the same appearance. This reconstruction seemed reasonable because the few early skin impressions known at the time did show scale patterns. Yet these impressions came mostly from very large species and from limited parts of the body. Paleontology was working with fragments, and fragments can easily mislead. The transformation began in the 1990s in northeastern China. In fine-grained volcanic ash deposits, small theropod fossils appeared with unusual halos around their bodies. At first, the structures were dismissed as degraded tissue or plant fibers. Under magnification, however, they revealed repeating filament shapes anchored into the skin. These were not cracks or decay artifacts, they were biological structures. The fossils preserved primitive feathers. The first confirmed example shocked the scientific community because the animal could not fly. Its arms were too short and its body too heavy for airborne movement. This meant feathers did not originate for flight. They existed long before wings capable of lifting an animal into the air. The purpose had to be something else. Insulation quickly became the leading explanation. A warm-blooded animal benefits from retaining heat, and filaments trapping air accomplish exactly that. Soon, more discoveries followed. Different species showed different feather types. Some had simple hair, like filaments covering the body. Others possessed branching structures resembling down. A few exhibited complex veined feathers similar to those of modern birds, yet still lacked the skeletal adaptations required for powered flight. The diversity indicated feathers evolved in stages, gradually increasing in complexity for multiple functions before flight ever occurred. Color entered the discussion when scientists began studying microscopic pigment structures called melanosomes preserved in fossil feathers. These tiny organelles determine color in modern birds. By comparing fossil shapes to living examples, researchers reconstructed patterns including stripes, patches, and iridescent surfaces. Dinosaurs, once imagined as uniformly grey, now appeared patterned and visually striking. Some predators bore countershading, darker on top and lighter underneath, aiding camouflage. Others likely used bright colours for display during mating or territorial signalling. Large dinosaurs were not exempt from feathered ancestry. Juveniles of certain species probably hatched with insulating coverings that thinned or changed as they matured. Young animals have higher heat loss due to small body size. As they grew massive, some species may have retained feathers only in certain areas or lost them almost entirely, similar to how large mammals have sparse hair compared to smaller relatives. Therefore, scale impressions found on adult specimens do not contradict feather presence during earlier life stages. Arms of many theropods contained attachment points for strong feather anchors. Even species far too heavy to fly possessed symmetrical wing-like arrangements. These structures may have assisted in balance while running, braking during downhill motion, or shielding eggs during incubation. A parent spreading feathered forelimbs over a nest could regulate temperature and protect embryos from sun and rain. Fossils capturing adults in brooding posture support this interpretation. Feathers also played a role in communication. Modern birds use plumage to signal readiness to mate, dominance, and species identity. Dinosaurs likely did the same. Crests, horns, and sails combined with colorful feathers could produce complex visual displays. In dense vegetation or across open plains, recognizing members of the same species quickly would prevent unnecessary conflict and enable group coordination. One of the most famous predators provides a good example of how perceptions changed. Early reconstructions depicted it as a naked, scaled giant. Later evidence from close relatives revealed feathered coverings across the body. Although full adult individuals may have had reduced plumage due to size, they almost certainly were not completely bare. Hatchlings and juveniles were likely fluffy, providing insulation and camouflage among vegetation. The evolutionary pathway becomes clearer when arranged step by step. First appeared simple filaments trapping air. Next came branching fibers, improving insulation. Later, veined feathers enabled controlled movement through air, first for gliding and maneuvering during leaps, eventually for powered flight in smaller descendants. Flight was not the origin of feathers, but the final refinement of a structure already serving multiple purposes. Skin impressions from some species still show scales, but this does not contradict feather presence. Modern birds themselves have scaled feet and sometimes scaled legs. Different body regions specialize for different needs. Protective scales may appear on areas experiencing abrasion, while feathers cover regions requiring insulation or display. Dinosaurs likely exhibited similar regional variation. The implications extend beyond appearance. Feathers reinforce the conclusion of high metabolic activity. Insulation is unnecessary for animals that rely entirely on external heat. It becomes crucial for creatures generating internal warmth. Therefore, the discovery of feathers provided independent confirmation that dinosaurs maintained elevated body temperatures. The world they inhabited would have looked far more vibrant than early paintings suggested. Herds moving across floodplains may have displayed patterns and colors comparable to modern birds. Predators stalking prey could blend into shadows using natural camouflage. Courtship rituals likely involved raised plumage and body postures rather than silent confrontation. The discovery sequence also reveals how scientific understanding evolves. For decades, absence of evidence was mistaken for evidence of absence. Only when preservation conditions allowed delicate structures to fossilize did the truth appear. Once the first example was found, similar features were recognized in previously collected specimens that had gone unnoticed. Feathers changed dinosaurs from distant reptilian curiosities into familiar biological relatives. Instead of monsters from a separate world, they became recognizable animals shaped by the same evolutionary pressures seen today. Insulation, communication, reproduction, and movement all influenced their development. Flight would later emerge as a remarkable adaptation, but it was only one chapter in a much longer story that began on the ground. As more feathered fossils were uncovered, paleontologists realized the discovery in China was not an isolated anomaly. Similar structures appeared across many branches of the theropod family tree. Some were tiny running hunters, no larger than a pigeon. Others were predators, the size of wolves. The pattern suggested feathers were not a rare mutation, but a widespread biological trait inherited from common ancestors. This meant the absence of feathers in older reconstructions came not from reality, but from lack of preservation. Understanding preservation explains why the misconception lasted so long. Feathers are delicate keratin structures that decay rapidly after death. Most dinosaur fossils form in environments where soft tissue disappears before burial. Only exceptional conditions, such as rapid burial in fine volcanic ash or oxygen-poor lake sediments, protect them long enough to fossilize. Once scientists searched specifically in those environments, the evidence multiplied quickly. The dinosaurs had not suddenly evolved feathers in one region. We had simply begun looking in the right places. Different feather types revealed different functions. Some species possessed long, symmetrical arm feathers that produced drag rather than lift. When modeled in wind tunnels, these structures created stability while running and turning. A fast predator could pivot sharply without losing balance. Others had tail fans capable of sudden expansion. Such fans would be visible from great distance, ideal for display. The idea of dinosaurs as silent hunters lurking in darkness faded. They were visual communicators, interacting constantly with their own kind. One small dinosaur, preserved with wings extended, provided a particularly revealing clue. Its feathers showed abrasion along the tips, but not along the base. This pattern matches animals that flap or glide rather than those that only display, yet the shoulder joint could not support full-powered flight. The most likely behavior was assisted running. The animal probably used its wings while sprinting uphill or leaping between obstacles, gaining traction and lift simultaneously. Modern birds still use this technique during early development, indicating the behavior predates true flight. Feathers also transformed understanding of dinosaur thermoregulation. If a small predator was covered in insulating filaments, overheating became a risk in hot climates. Some fossils show patchy distribution, dense on the torso and sparse on the limbs. This arrangement allows heat retention in cool conditions while enabling heat release during activity. Large species might have retained display feathers only along the back or arms, reducing insulation but preserving communication ability. Evolution balanced temperature control with visual signaling. Eggs discovered in carefully arranged rings offered additional support. Adults found sitting over clutches displayed forelimbs positioned symmetrically, suggesting feathered wings shielded the eggs. The spacing between eggs matched the reach of the arms. Heat from the parent's body would incubate the embryos. This behavior requires feathers to trap warmth and protect developing young from environmental fluctuations. The nesting strategy mirrors modern ground nesting birds almost exactly. The social consequences of plumage likely influence survival. In herd species, individuals must identify one another quickly. Patterns across the body can act as recognition markers. Young animals following adults depend on visual cues to maintain group cohesion. Predators also benefit from coordinated movement when pursuing prey. Coloration could signal intention, reducing accidental conflict within a pack. These roles demonstrate feathers were part of daily life, not an occasional ornament. One of the strongest confirmations came from evolutionary sequencing. The simplest feather types appear in the earliest relatives of birds. More complex branching structures arise later. Finally, asymmetrical flight feathers emerge in true flying descendants. This gradual progression matches evolutionary theory precisely. Complex flight-capable wings did not appear suddenly. They were assembled piece by piece from structures originally serving entirely different purposes. The public image of large carnivores changed dramatically once close relatives were found covered in plumage. Skeletal similarities indicate that well-known giant predators descended from feathered ancestors and retained at least partial coverings. Computer-generated reconstructions now show juveniles with thick coats that thin as body size increases. Instead of bare-skinned hatchlings growing into scaly giants, the opposite likely occurred. Young individuals appeared almost bird-like, becoming more sparsely feathered as adults. Even herbivorous dinosaurs outside the direct bird lineage have yielded filament impressions. This suggests primitive feather-like coverings may have existed earlier in dinosaur evolution than once thought. If so, feathers were not originally linked to flight or predation, but to body regulation and signaling across multiple groups. The trait may have been lost in some lineages while retained in others, explaining mixed fossil evidence. Color patterns reconstructed from pigment structures reveal ecological adaptation. Dark backs with light undersides help conceal animals from both predators above and prey below. Stripes break up the outline in forested habitats. Bright crests likely appeared during mating seasons. The prehistoric landscape therefore contained moving patterns and seasonal displays rather than uniform monochrome creatures. This growing body of evidence forces a complete reconsideration of dinosaur appearance. Skin impressions showing scales are no longer interpreted as full body coverings, but as localized armor or foot protection. Feathers dominate the majority of body surfaces in many species, particularly smaller and medium-sized forms. The classic reptile aesthetic survives only in limited cases, mostly among the largest adults where insulation became unnecessary. By integrating all these findings, a new visual narrative emerges. Imagine a dawn floodplain where mist rises from shallow water. Herd animals covered in patterned plumage move across open ground. Juveniles cluster near adults, their down catching early light. Predators watch from cover, their coloration blending into shadows. When they run, forelimb feathers stabilize motion and tails fan outward to maintain balance. The environment is active and visually rich, filled with motion and color. Feathers therefore do more than adjust appearance. They redefine behavior, physiology, and ecology simultaneously. They confirm high metabolism, support parental care, enable communication, and prepare the evolutionary path to flight. The creatures once portrayed as naked, scaled reptiles become recognizable as relatives of living birds. The boundary between past and present dissolves, revealing continuity rather than extinction. Few animals in history have gained the reputation carried by Tyrannosaurus rex. Popular media portrayed it as the fastest, strongest, and most unstoppable hunter ever to exist. It chased vehicles, outran victims, and defeated any opponent by sheer power. For decades, this image shaped public understanding of prehistoric ecosystems. Yet, careful examination of its anatomy tells a far more complex story. The first myth to collapse involves speed. Early reconstructions assumed long legs meant rapid pursuit. However, biomechanics studies analyzing bone strength and muscle attachment points revealed limits. A running animal experiences forces several times its body weight with every step. Tyrannosaurus weighed several tons. If it ran at extreme speed, the stress on its leg bones would exceed safe limits and cause fractures. Computer simulations suggest it moved at a brisk walking pace and possibly a moderate jog, but not the high-speed chase seen in films. Its body was built for stability and power rather than sprinting acceleration. Balance further supports this conclusion. The tail acted as a massive counterweight, keeping the torso horizontal. While this allowed efficient movement, it also created momentum that required control. Sharp turns at high speed would risk falling, and a fall for such a heavy animal could be fatal. Predators, dependent on rapid pursuit, evolve flexible spines and lighter frames, features absent here. Instead, Tyrannosaurus possessed a rigid structure optimized for short forward lunges rather than long chases. Bite force, however, was extraordinary. The skull bones were thick and interlocked, distributing pressure across the entire head. Teeth were not knife-like blades, but thick, crushing spikes. When researchers modeled jaw muscles, the resulting force surpassed any known terrestrial predator. Rather than slicing flesh delicately, it crushed bone directly. This feeding method suggests an animal designed to dismantle carcasses efficiently, accessing marrow and nutrients unavailable to other predators. Tooth wear patterns support this interpretation. Many teeth display heavy abrasion and breakage, followed by healing, indicating repeated contact with hard material. Such damage occurs when biting bone frequently. Modern bone-crushing animals, such as hyenas, exhibit similar wear. A hunter relying primarily on soft tissue rarely subjects its teeth to such stress. Tyrannosaurus appears adapted to consume entire carcasses, not merely tear flesh. Its sense of smell was equally remarkable. The olfactory bulbs in the brain cavity are proportionally enormous. This suggests the ability to detect odors over long distances. Combined with moderate speed, this implies a lifestyle that included locating dead or weakened animals rather than exclusively pursuing healthy prey. Scavenging does not mean weakness. Large predators today often rely on both hunting and scavenging to maximize energy efficiency. Vision also played a role. The forward-facing eyes provided depth perception, but the skull shape limited wide lateral viewing angles. Instead of tracking prey across open plains at high speed, Tyrannosaurus likely approached carefully, using cover and short bursts of motion. Its strategy may have resembled an ambush specialist more than a marathon runner. Another overlooked factor is growth stage. Juveniles possessed longer legs relative to body size and lighter frames. They may have been faster and more agile, capable of chasing smaller prey. As they matured and gained mass, speed decreased, but bite force increased. This suggests different ecological roles at different ages. Younger individuals hunted actively, while adults dominated carcass consumption and large prey dispatched through overwhelming power. Evidence from healed bite marks on herbivore fossils provides clues about hunting style. Some wounds show survival after attack, indicating failed attempts rather than constant success. No predator is perfect. Even powerful ones misjudge distance or timing. The presence of these marks demonstrates interaction, but not unstoppable dominance. Competition also existed. Other large carnivores inhabited similar environments at different times and places. Some possessed longer arms for grappling or lighter builds for agility. Ecosystems rarely support a single supreme predator without rivals. Each species occupies a niche shaped by body structure and behavior. Tyrannosaurus specialized in crushing strength and sensory detection rather than speed or maneuverability. Energy economics reinforce this picture. Large animals cannot afford constant high-speed chases because the cost outweighs caloric gain. Efficient predators minimize effort while maximizing reward. Locating vulnerable prey, ambushing at close range, and consuming entire carcasses achieves this balance. The anatomy of Tyrannosaurus fits precisely within that framework. The myth of the ultimate unstoppable hunter arose because size and fearsome teeth are visually striking. Yet biology values efficiency over spectacle. An animal dominating its environment does so through specialization. Tyrannosaurus excelled not by outrunning everything, but by ending encounters quickly once contact occurred. One precise bite could disable prey or dismantle remains beyond use for competitors. Understanding this changes its character. Instead of a reckless pursuer charging across landscapes, imagine a calculated opportunist moving steadily through territory. It follows scent trails, approaches carefully, and relies on sudden, overwhelming force at close range. Such behavior matches the physical evidence preserved in bone and tooth rather than cinematic interpretation. Once speed was reconsidered and the crushing bite understood, another question emerged. How did Tyrannosaurus actually interact with other predators in its environment? The popular image places it alone at the top of a simple hierarchy, yet ecosystems rarely function that way. Multiple carnivores coexist by dividing resources, time, or prey types. Fossil evidence suggests Tyrannosaurus participated in such a network rather than dominating every situation unchallenged. Bone beds containing mixed species provide the first clues. In several formations, remains of large herbivores appear alongside marks from different kinds of teeth. Some gouges match the thick conical teeth of Tyrannosaurus, while others match narrower slicing teeth from smaller theropods. This indicates carcasses were shared sequentially. A large individual may have opened the body, exposing internal tissues and bone marrow, after which smaller carnivores fed on remaining flesh. Rather than a solitary monarch consuming everything, Tyrannosaurus functioned as part of a feeding chain. Its forelimbs also reveal limitations, often overlooked. The arms were powerful but short, unable to reach the mouth easily. They were unlikely to grapple large, struggling prey directly. Instead, they probably helped stabilize the body while rising from resting positions, or held partners during mating. Hunting animals that rely on forelimb restraint tend to have longer reach and grasping claws. The reduced arms suggest reliance on jaws as the primary tool, reinforcing the ambush and bite strategy rather than wrestling combat. Trackway evidence further informs behavior. Large theropod footprints typically appear solitary, not arranged in coordinated group patterns seen in some smaller predatory species. This implies Tyrannosaurus did not regularly hunt in packs. Group hunting requires communication and agility to coordinate pursuit. A solitary hunter instead selects vulnerable targets and depends on surprise. This again matches the anatomy of a heavy animal, capable of delivering decisive force at close distance but not prolonged pursuit. Scavenging ability likely provided a major advantage. The immense bite allowed it to process remains other predators could not access. Breaking large bones yields fat-rich marrow, a highly valuable energy source. In environments where large herbivores occasionally died from drought, disease, or injury, a creature able to consume the entire carcass could survive periods when active hunting was less successful. This flexibility improves survival more than constant risky chases. Even its teeth reveal replacement strategies suited to this lifestyle. Teeth were frequently shed and regrown throughout life. Heavy wear from bone crushing would damage them regularly, but continuous replacement ensured functionality. This is similar to sharks that feed on tough material. A predator depending mainly on slicing flesh does not need such extreme replacement frequency. Another aspect involves prey behavior. Massive herbivores traveled in herds, and healthy adults were dangerous opponents. A head-on attack risked injury. Fossils show healed fractures in Tyrannosaurus ribs and limbs, indicating accidents occurred. Therefore, selecting weak, injured, or young individuals would reduce risk. Scent detection and patience would help identify such targets. Once within range, a powerful bite could end resistance quickly. Comparisons with modern ecosystems clarify the analogy. Lions are often called kings of the savannah, yet they are neither the fastest nor the strongest animals there. They compete with hyenas, leopards, and scavengers. Their dominance comes from combining strengths efficiently. Tyrannosaurus likely occupied a comparable position, influential but not unmatched in every trait. Different predators controlled different opportunities. Growth stages also meant internal competition. Younger individuals probably hunted smaller animals to avoid conflict with adults. As they matured, their role shifted. This age-based niche separation allowed multiple individuals of the same species to inhabit the same territory without constant confrontation. Fossil assemblages containing individuals of varying ages support this interpretation. Environmental context further weakens the ultimate predator myth. Prehistoric landscapes contained rivers, forests, and open areas. Large, heavy animals navigate such terrain carefully. Ambush near water crossings or migration routes offers higher success than open pursuit. Therefore, territory knowledge and patience mattered more than speed. Understanding Tyrannosaurus in this ecological framework transforms it from a singular superpredator into a specialized participant within a balanced system. Its immense bite force made it capable of finishing encounters decisively, but that strength compensated for limits in speed and maneuverability. It did not need to be the fastest or most agile, because its strategy avoided situations requiring those traits. The legend of the unstoppable hunter arose because power is dramatic and easy to imagine. Scientific reconstruction, however, depends on anatomical constraint and environmental logic. Bones reveal capability, and capability suggests behavior. When interpreted together, they portray an animal effective through precision rather than excess. Tyrannosaurus rex, therefore, remains impressive, but for different reasons than tradition suggested. Its success came from sensory awareness, calculated movement, and unmatched crushing ability. Instead of ruling through relentless chase, it ruled through efficiency, exploiting opportunities and ending them quickly. The prehistoric world was not a stage for a single champion, but a complex web where each species thrived by fitting its own role. When people imagine the age of dinosaurs, they often picture endless jungles filled with giant ferns and thick, steaming swamps. The ground is muddy, the air is humid, and every creature lives in constant mist. This image became popular because early fossil discoveries were frequently found in sediment once associated with water. The assumption followed that dinosaurs needed swamp environments to support their weight. Modern geology has overturned that assumption completely. The continents during the Mesozoic era were arranged very differently from today. Instead of separate landmasses spread across the globe, much of Earth's land formed large, connected supercontinents. At different times, these included Pangaea and later Laurasia and Gondwana. Vast interior regions existed far from ocean moisture. These areas were dry, seasonal, and sometimes desert-like. Fossils discovered in ancient dune deposits show dinosaurs walking across wind-shaped sand similar to modern deserts. They did not depend on water for support. Their bones were strong enough to carry them across hard ground. Plant life also differed dramatically. Grass, which dominates modern landscapes, had not yet evolved for most of the dinosaur era. Instead, forests were composed mainly of conifers, cycads, ginkgo trees, and tall horsetails. Many of these plants reproduced by spores rather than flowers. The absence of grass meant herbivorous dinosaurs fed by stripping leaves, clipping branches, or cropping low shrubs rather than grazing fields. Their teeth and jaws evolved accordingly. Broad leaf shredders replaced grinding molars typical of modern grazing mammals. Flowering plants appeared relatively late and spread gradually. As they expanded, new food sources became available, altering ecosystems. Some herbivores adapted to the changing vegetation, while others declined. This demonstrates that dinosaur evolution was closely tied to plant evolution. The world they inhabited was not static, but changing over millions of years, with forests shifting composition and distribution across continents. The atmosphere itself contributed to a different environment. Carbon dioxide levels were higher than today, creating a greenhouse climate. Polar regions were warmer and lacked permanent ice caps. Seasonal variation existed, but was less extreme overall. Dinosaurs could live at high latitudes, experiencing long periods of darkness during winter months. Fossils found near ancient polar circles include juveniles and adults together, showing year-round habitation rather than migration away from cold. Higher temperatures influenced growth and distribution of vegetation. Large forests extended into areas that are now temperate or cold. However, this did not create uniform jungle conditions. Inland regions experienced drought cycles and seasonal rivers. Sediment layers reveal alternating flood deposits and dry soils cracked by heat. Dinosaurs lived through both wet and dry periods, adapting behavior to survive fluctuating water availability. Insects and other small creatures also differed. Without grasses and many modern flowering plants, insect diversity followed other patterns. Some species reached large sizes, while others filled ecological roles now occupied by different groups. These smaller organisms formed the base of the food web supporting larger animals. Their presence indicates complex ecological interactions rather than simple predator and prey relationships. The sky looked unfamiliar as well. Birds were present late in the era, but earlier periods saw flying reptiles dominating the air. These pterosaurs ranged from small insect catchers to giants with wingspans exceeding modern aircraft. Their presence affected ground animal behavior. Small dinosaurs likely avoided open spaces during certain times to escape aerial predators, shaping daily activity cycles. Rivers flowed differently across supercontinents. Without modern mountain ranges in their current positions, drainage patterns created vast floodplains that shifted over centuries. Many dinosaur trackways appear along ancient river margins, where animals gathered for water. Seasonal flooding buried footprints in sediment, preserving evidence of herd movement. These landscapes resembled broad savannas more than swamps. Night conditions also diverged from modern expectations. Without large human cities or artificial light, nocturnal animals relied entirely on natural illumination. Some dinosaurs show large eye sockets, suggesting activity in dim conditions. Predators and prey may have divided time between day and night to reduce competition, adding another layer of ecological complexity. Even sound would have differed. Dense vegetation and wide plains carry noise differently than enclosed forests. Calls used for communication may have traveled great distances. Structures such as crests and hollow chambers in skulls likely amplified vocalizations. Herd coordination and territorial displays depended on such signals across open terrain. The combination of continental arrangement, plant types, atmospheric composition, and animal interactions produced a world unfamiliar to modern observers. Rather than a single uniform habitat, it was a patchwork of forests, plains, deserts, and river systems across vast connected lands. Dinosaurs thrived in each, adapting to local conditions over immense spans of time. Understanding this environment removes another persistent misconception. They were not confined to swamps or constantly surrounded by steaming vegetation. They inhabited varied ecosystems comparable in diversity to those seen today, though populated by entirely different organisms. The prehistoric Earth was not primitive, but simply different, shaped by climatic and biological factors unique to its era. Climate stability played a major role in shaping dinosaur ecosystems. Unlike the modern world, where ice ages repeatedly advance and retreat, much of the Mesozoic experienced long stretches without polar ice caps. This does not mean temperatures were uniform everywhere, but the range between extreme cold and extreme heat was narrower. As a result, habitats persisted for millions of years without being erased by glacial movement. Species had time to specialize deeply within particular environments, leading to unique communities that lasted far longer than most modern ecosystems. Seasonal patterns still existed, especially in regions far from the equator. Evidence from growth rings inside fossil wood and bone shows yearly cycles of faster and slower development. Dinosaurs living at high latitudes experienced months of darkness, followed by continuous daylight. Instead of migrating away permanently, many remained year-round. To survive the dim winters, they likely relied on stored energy and possibly insulating coverings. This challenges the assumption that all dinosaurs preferred tropical warmth. Some endured conditions comparable to modern cool temperate forests, though without freezing temperatures as severe as today. Rainfall distribution also created varied landscapes. In certain basins, sediments show repeated drought layers where rivers dried into isolated pools. Fossils of multiple species found together in these layers suggest animals gathered at remaining water sources during dry seasons. Competition increased, and predators could ambush prey concentrated along shrinking shorelines. When rains returned, floods buried the area, preserving entire communities in sudden deposits. These cycles of scarcity and abundance structured daily survival rather than constant, lush vegetation. Soils from ancient floodplains reveal plant roots penetrating deeply, indicating firm ground capable of supporting heavy bodies. The old belief that dinosaurs required buoyancy from water came from misinterpreting bone thickness and posture. Once upright locomotion was understood, the geological context confirmed they were fully terrestrial. They walked across hardened mud, sand, and forest floors just as large mammals do today. Fire likely occurred as well. Charcoal fragments preserved in some formations show ancient wildfires swept through vegetation. After fires, fresh plant growth would attract herbivores, followed by predators. This cycle mirrors modern savanna ecology, reinforcing the idea that prehistoric environments operated under recognizable ecological principles despite different species. The absence of grass altered herd movement patterns. Modern grazing animals move continuously to find new pasture because grass regrows quickly but depletes locally. Dinosaur herbivores feeding on shrubs and tree foliage may have remained longer in one area until branches were stripped. This could produce patchy browsing zones rather than wide grazing migrations. Fossilized forests containing heavily chewed trunks support this interpretation. Waterways hosted their own communities. Crocodile relatives, turtles, fish, and amphibians shared rivers with dinosaurs that came to drink. Trackways show cautious approach patterns near water edges, indicating awareness of aquatic predators. The boundary between land and water was a dangerous place, shaping behavior much as riverbanks influence modern wildlife today. Night and day activity cycles probably varied widely. Some small dinosaurs possessed enlarged eye openings suited to low-light vision, while others had smaller openings optimized for bright daylight. This division reduces direct competition. A prey species active at dusk could avoid a predator specialized for midday hunting. Such partitioning allows many species to coexist within the same physical space. Wind patterns across large supercontinents also mattered. Vast inland regions experienced dust storms that carried fine particles across plains. Sediment layers show wind-blown deposits covering footprints and vegetation. Animals living there adapted to periodic storms, perhaps seeking shelter in forests or low terrain. These conditions would have influenced migration routes and seasonal behavior. The sensory world was equally unfamiliar. Without flowering plant perfumes common today, the air carried different scents, dominated by resin and spore-bearing vegetation. Sound traveled across open plains without modern urban noise. Visual horizons stretched far across unobstructed landscapes. For a herd animal, spotting distant movement meant the difference between safety and danger. Over millions of years, continental drift gradually separated landmasses. As oceans widened, populations became isolated and evolved independently. Similar animals on different continents diverged into distinct forms. The diversity of dinosaurs partly reflects this geographic separation rather than a single global community. Each region developed its own predators, herbivores, and ecological balances. Altogether, the prehistoric world functioned as a dynamic and varied environment rather than a uniform steaming jungle. Climate, geography, vegetation, and animal behavior interacted continuously. Dinosaurs succeeded not because conditions were simple, but because they adapted to complexity over immense timescales. Replacing the old swamp image with this broader understanding helps explain their long dominance. They inhabited deserts, forests, river valleys, and polar regions, adjusting physiology and behavior accordingly. The age of dinosaurs was not a single setting, but an entire planetary chapter filled with landscapes both familiar in structure and alien in detail. For much of the 20th century, dinosaurs were portrayed as creatures guided almost entirely by instinct. Their large bodies and small skull cavities suggested slow thinking and limited awareness. This assumption influenced early reconstructions, which showed them as animals reacting only to immediate stimuli. However, closer examination of their brains, behavior patterns, and social evidence gradually overturned this belief. The first indication came from brain-to-body ratios. While many large herbivores did possess relatively small brains, several predatory dinosaurs showed unexpectedly expanded brain regions. Endocasts, the natural molds formed when sediment fills a skull, reveal structure and proportion. In numerous theropods, the cerebellum and optic lobes are enlarged. The cerebellum controls balance and coordination, while optic lobes process visual information. Animals that rely on precise movement and tracking moving targets require advanced processing in these areas. This implies an active nervous system capable of quick adjustments rather than slow, reflexive reactions. Vision itself provides additional evidence. Forward-facing eyes produce overlapping fields of view, allowing depth perception. Many predatory dinosaurs possess this feature. Depth perception is essential when calculating distance during movement or attack. A creature that misjudges distance wastes energy and risks injury. The development of binocular vision suggests regular engagement with moving prey and obstacles, tasks requiring continuous sensory interpretation. Trackways preserved in ancient sediments also indicate coordinated behavior. Parallel lines of footprints from multiple individuals show groups traveling together at consistent speed and spacing. The arrangement changes when turning or encountering obstacles, maintaining formation. Such synchronized movement is difficult without awareness of neighbors. While it does not prove complex planning, it does demonstrate social awareness beyond solitary wandering. Nesting colonies provide even stronger clues. In some locations, hundreds of nests appear arranged in orderly patterns across wide areas. Each nest maintains a certain distance from others, suggesting deliberate placement rather than random deposition. Adults likely recognize territorial boundaries to prevent conflict while still benefiting from group protection. Colonial nesting requires repeated return to the same site season after season, indicating memory of location and environmental conditions. Parental care further reveals behavioral sophistication. Fossils show adults positioned over eggs in protective postures. Juvenile skeletons found near adults at various growth stages suggest prolonged association after hatching. Feeding and guarding young requires recognition and consistent attention. Reptiles typically abandon eggs after laying them, whereas communication structures hint at social signaling. Crests, horns, and expanded nasal passages likely produced sound or visual displays. Hollow chambers in skulls could resonate calls over long distances. Coordinating herd movement or attracting mates benefits from reliable signaling systems. Developing and interpreting such signals requires neural processing beyond simple reflex. Some herbivorous species display evidence of migration between seasonal habitats. Moving as a group over large distances involves navigation and memory of routes. Individuals must respond to environmental cues and maintain orientation across changing terrain. This capacity suggests learning through experience rather than rigid automatic behavior. Predatory strategies also imply adaptability. Tooth wear patterns and healed injuries on prey bones show repeated encounters rather than single opportunistic attacks. A predator that survives multiple attempts learns from prior outcomes. Behavioral flexibility increases hunting success and reduces risk. Such patterns point toward problem-solving rather than random action. Even small details such as hand structure support manipulation ability. Certain theropods possessed grasping forelimbs capable of precise motion. While not comparable to primate hands, they could hold objects or restrain prey. Using limbs in coordination with vision and balance involves neural integration beyond simple biting reflexes. Comparisons with modern animals help interpret these findings. Birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs, display complex behavior including tool use, memory of food locations, and social hierarchy recognition. Since these abilities evolved from ancestral traits, at least some dinosaur groups likely possessed foundational cognitive capabilities that later expanded in birds. Environmental complexity also encourages intelligence. Living in herds, caring for offspring, and competing with multiple predators and prey demands flexible responses. An animal reacting only through instinct cannot easily adapt to changing conditions. The longevity of dinosaur dominance suggests they met ecological challenges effectively over millions of years. All of these lines of evidence converge on a new understanding. Dinosaurs were not mindless giants wandering aimlessly through ancient landscapes. They observed surroundings, responded to group members, and adjusted behavior to circumstances. Their brains may not match mammalian cognition in all aspects, but they exceeded the simple reptilian stereotype once assigned to them. Recognizing this alters their portrayal significantly. Instead of static creatures reacting mechanically, imagine animals aware of position, recognizing companions, and responding to signals across distance. The prehistoric world contained interaction and learning, not only movement and feeding. Evidence for dinosaur intelligence becomes even stronger when examining hunting and survival strategies in detail. A predator that simply charges every moving object wastes energy and risks injury. Fossil patterns instead suggest calculated behavior. In several formations, prey skeletons show repeated injuries that healed before the animal eventually died. These wounds occur in similar locations, implying predators targeted specific vulnerable areas rather than striking randomly. Such consistency indicates recognition of anatomy and refinement of technique over time. Pack coordination may have existed in certain species as well. Some trackways preserve multiple individuals moving in the same direction, with spacing appropriate for surrounding a target. The arrangement resembles cooperative positioning seen in modern social predators. While it is difficult to prove conversation or deliberate planning, maintaining relative positions during pursuit requires constant attention to companions. Each animal must adjust speed and direction in response to others, suggesting awareness beyond solitary instinct. Herbivores also demonstrate cognitive complexity. Defensive structures such as horns and tail weapons were not only passive protection, but tools used strategically. Fossils show impact marks consistent with active defense against attackers. For a herd to repel predators, individuals must react to alarm signals and orient themselves collectively. Rapid response to danger across a group depends on communication, whether through sound, posture, or movement patterns. Juvenile growth stages reveal learning behavior. Young dinosaurs often had different body proportions than adults, making them more vulnerable. Surviving to maturity likely required staying within group protection and interpreting warning cues correctly. Bone beds containing numerous juveniles of similar age suggest seasonal gatherings, possibly functioning as nurseries. In such environments, repeated exposure to adults and peers would allow learning of safe routes, feeding sites, and predator avoidance strategies. Memory is also implied by nesting site fidelity. Some fossilized nesting grounds show multiple layers of eggs deposited over long intervals. Returning to the same location requires recognition of landscape features and successful past conditions. Modern birds display this behavior, navigating hundreds of kilometers to familiar breeding areas. The evolutionary continuity between birds and dinosaurs suggests similar capabilities existed earlier. Sensory integration played an important role. Enlarged inner ear structures in certain species indicate refined balance and head orientation. Rapid head movement stabilizes vision while running, allowing accurate perception of surroundings. Combining visual, auditory, and balance information enables coordinated motion through complex terrain. This level of sensory processing requires a brain capable of merging multiple inputs simultaneously. Feeding flexibility provides another clue. Tooth wear patterns in herbivores change seasonally, indicating shifts in diet when preferred plants were unavailable. Adjusting feeding strategy based on availability shows adaptability. Instead of depending on a single food source, they exploited various resources. Such flexibility improves survival during environmental fluctuations and reflects behavioral choice rather than rigid instinct. Some small theropods possessed relatively large brain cavities compared to body size, approaching proportions seen in certain modern birds. These animals likely hunted agile prey such as insects or small vertebrates. Capturing such targets demands quick reaction time and precise timing. Repeated success would depend on learning from failed attempts and modifying approach angles or speed. Communication structures further support social intelligence. Hollow crests and resonating chambers in skulls could produce different tones. Variation in call patterns might signal alarm, mating readiness, or territory boundaries. Interpreting distinct sounds and responding appropriately involves neural processing and recognition memory. Herd survival depends on understanding these signals rapidly. Even the arrangement of footprints around watering areas indicates awareness of risk. In several sites, herbivore tracks approach water cautiously, clustering before entry. Predator tracks appear nearby but offset, suggesting ambush positioning. Repeated patterns imply both predator and prey recognized common behaviors and adjusted actions accordingly. This dynamic interaction resembles modern ecological relationships where each side, yet it exceeds automatic reaction. They evaluated surroundings, responded to companions, and altered behavior after experience. Evolution favored individuals able to interpret complex environments rather than act blindly. Understanding dinosaur intelligence reshapes their ecological image. Herds were not random gatherings, but organized communities. Predators were not uncontrolled killing machines, but selective hunters optimizing success. Parents did not abandon offspring immediately, but guarded them during vulnerable stages. These behaviors require neural systems processing information continuously. The transition from dinosaur to bird did not create intelligence from nothing. Instead, it refined existing capacities. Modern birds display problem-solving, memory, and communication because their ancestors already possessed foundational cognitive abilities. The prehistoric world, therefore, contained interaction and awareness comparable in principle, if not degree, to that seen in living ecosystems. Dinosaurs should be viewed as active participants in complex social and environmental networks. Their brains guided decisions influencing survival across millions of years. Recognizing this dissolves the final remnants of the slow, unthinking giant stereotype and replaces it with animals capable of perception, response, and learned behavior within their ancient landscapes. The extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs is often imagined as a single catastrophic day. A massive asteroid strikes Earth, fire sweeps across continents, and all large animals perish almost immediately. This dramatic image is powerful but incomplete. Geological evidence reveals a far slower and more complicated process. The impact marked the beginning of the end, not the moment of disappearance. About 66 million years ago, an asteroid several kilometers wide struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The energy released exceeded that of billions of nuclear explosions. Rock vaporized instantly, and a crater over 100 kilometers across formed. Shock waves traveled through Earth's crust, triggering earthquakes and underwater landslides. Debris blasted into the atmosphere and beyond, beginning a chain of environmental effects that unfolded over months and years rather than minutes. Near the impact site, destruction was immediate. Forests ignited as superheated material rained down. Animals within the regional radius could not survive the heat and pressure. However, most of the planet lay far from the crater. For them, the first consequence came from the sky darkening. Dust, ash, and tiny glass particles spread globally, blocking sunlight. Without light, photosynthesis slowed dramatically. Plants began dying within weeks, reducing food available for herbivores. Temperature dropped as sunlight diminished. Unlike a brief night, this darkness persisted for extended periods. Evidence from sediment layers shows sudden changes in plant pollen and spores, indicating widespread vegetation loss. Herbivores dependent on fresh growth struggled to find nutrition. Some likely survived initially by consuming stored plant material or roots, but prolonged shortage weakened populations. Predators felt the effects later, but inevitably. As herbivore numbers declined, hunting opportunities decreased. Scavenging increased temporarily because many animals died from starvation or exposure. Large predators could feed on these carcasses for a time, but once the supply ended, they too faced scarcity. The extinction sequence therefore moved upward through the food chain, rather than striking all groups simultaneously. Oceans activity rather than direct mechanical destruction. Chemical evidence supports prolonged environmental stress. A thin clay layer worldwide contains high concentrations of iridium, rare on Earth but common in asteroids. Above this layer, fossils of large dinosaurs abruptly vanish, yet smaller organisms persist briefly before declining. This indicates survival through the initial impact, followed by gradual extinction due to changing conditions. Wildfires likely occurred globally as re-entering debris heated the atmosphere. Charcoal deposits found in many regions confirm widespread burning. After fires, landscapes remained barren under dim skies. With little vegetation, erosion increased and rivers carried sediment into basins, altering habitats further. Recovery could not begin while sunlight remained reduced. Some dinosaurs may have survived months or even years after the impact. Nesting grounds above the iridium layer contain limited but suggestive traces. However, reproduction requires stable food supply. Eggs and juveniles are especially vulnerable to environmental disruption. Even if adults endured temporarily, future generations failed to mature in sufficient numbers. The extinction therefore resembled a prolonged ecological collapse. The asteroid initiated atmospheric changes that dismantled food networks piece by piece. Larger animals suffered first because they required the most energy. Smaller creatures, capable of feeding on varied resources, endured longer. Size, metabolism, and diet determined survival probability more than proximity to the crater. Understanding this timeline changes the emotional narrative. Instead of a sudden apocalyptic flash, imagine a world growing quieter year by year. Herds shrink as young fail to reach adulthood. Predators wander farther searching for prey. Vegetation becomes sparse under dim light. Eventually, populations fall below recovery thresholds and vanish entirely. The asteroid impact remains the trigger, but extinction unfolded through environmental consequences, leaving landscapes stripped of foliage. Herbivores that depended on constant feeding faced the greatest pressure. Large bodies required enormous daily intake, and without abundant vegetation, even healthy adults weakened quickly. Water systems changed as well. With reduced plant cover, soil eroded into rivers and lakes. Sediment choked waterways, affecting aquatic life that depended on clear water for feeding and reproduction. Fish populations declined, removing another food source for animals capable of fishing. The interconnected nature of ecosystems meant each loss triggered another. A single environmental disturbance spread across multiple habitats simultaneously. Acid rain likely followed the impact. Vaporized rock and atmospheric gases reacted to form acidic precipitation falling over large regions. This damaged leaves and contaminated fresh water. Amphibians and small aquatic organisms sensitive to water chemistry suffered heavily. Their disappearance removed prey for medium-sized predators and disrupted insect populations, further destabilizing the food web. Over time, dust began settling out of the atmosphere. Sunlight gradually increased, but recovery was not immediate. Many plant species had already vanished, from extensive areas. Empty ground required recolonization by hardy pioneer plants capable of rapid growth in disturbed soil. Ferns often fill this role, and layers rich in fern spores appear directly above the impact boundary in numerous locations. These plants formed the first stage of ecological rebuilding, but they provided limited nutrition for large herbivores accustomed to other vegetation. During this transition period, survival favored small generalist animals. Creatures that could eat seeds, insects, or decaying matter endured better than specialized feeders. Burrowing behavior also helped. Animals living underground experienced less temperature fluctuation and protection from atmospheric fallout. Many mammals, reptiles, and birds fit these criteria. Large dinosaurs, however, required open space and vast quantities of specific food, leaving them exposed to every environmental change. Reproduction cycles worsened the crisis. Large dinosaurs laid eggs that needed stable temperatures and parental care. Unpredictable climate and scarce food reduced successful hatching. Even when eggs survived, juveniles faced immediate competition for limited resources. High mortality among young prevented population recovery. Small animals with shorter reproductive cycles adapted more quickly, producing multiple generations during the same period. Oceans slowly recovered as sunlight returned, allowing plankton to re-establish. This process took years, not days. Marine ecosystems rebuilt from the smallest organisms upward. Land followed a similar pattern. After pioneer plants spread, shrubs and trees gradually returned, restoring habitat complexity. By then, however, the large dinosaur populations had already declined beyond recovery. Fossil records show a clear boundary. Below it, diverse dinosaur species appear in abundance. Above it, only smaller survivors remain. There is no gradual replacement by new, large forms immediately afterward, indicating a true extinction rather than simple migration. The recovery of large terrestrial animals required millions of years, eventually filled by mammals evolving into larger roles. Birds survived because their biology matched the new conditions. Smaller bodies needed less food. Beaks allowed consumption of seeds that persisted even when plants died. Some could fly to scattered resources or shelter in trees and burrows. Their reproductive cycles were shorter, enabling rapid population rebound once conditions improved. They were dinosaurs adapted to crisis conditions rather than giant specialists tied to stable abundance. The extinction, therefore, represents a chain reaction lasting decades. Initial destruction was brief, but environmental aftereffects extended far longer. Every stage removed another support from the ecosystem until only adaptable forms remained. The asteroid provided the spark, yet climate, chemistry, and ecological dependency carried the process forward. Understanding this sequence replaces the idea of a single, catastrophic moment with a prolonged struggle for survival. For years, life on Earth existed in reduced and unstable form. Only after gradual atmospheric clearing did recovery begin. By then, the age of large dinosaurs had ended, not in a sudden flash, but through a slow collapse of the world they depended on. For generations, the extinction of the dinosaurs was described as total disappearance. The narrative ended with an empty world waiting for mammals to take control. Yet modern biology has revealed that this ending was never entirely true. A branch of dinosaurs survived the catastrophe and continues to live today. Every sparrow, eagle, and pigeon represents a living member of the dinosaur lineage. The connection becomes clear when comparing skeletons in detail. The legs of birds bend in the same pattern as small theropod dinosaurs, with the ankle positioned high and the lower limb extended. The 3 forward-facing toes and a reduced rear toe mirror fossilized footprints preserved in ancient rock. Even the arrangement of bones within the foot is nearly identical. These similarities go far beyond general appearance. They represent inherited anatomical structure. The wrist joint provides another decisive link. Certain small dinosaurs possessed a half-moon-shaped wrist bone, allowing the forelimb to fold sideways against the body. In birds, the wing folds in exactly the same way. This specialized joint serves little purpose in non-flying animals, unless it evolved before flight for other functions, such as grasping or balance. The presence of this feature in fossils demonstrates that bird wings developed from pre-existing forelimbs rather than appearing suddenly. Feathers strengthen the relationship further. As seen in earlier discoveries, many non-avian dinosaurs possessed feathers of varying complexity. Birds simply refined these structures for powered flight. The microscopic structure of modern feathers matches fossilized versions almost perfectly. Both share branching patterns and attachment points in the skin. This continuity leaves little doubt that the same biological system passed directly from one group to the other. Breathing systems also match. Birds possess air sacs connected to hollow bones, allowing efficient oxygen flow. Fossilized dinosaur bones show the same internal cavities arranged in similar patterns. This system supports high metabolism and sustained activity. The fact that modern birds retain it confirms they inherited respiratory design rather than evolving it independently. Reproduction reveals another connection. Dinosaur eggs share layered shells and pore arrangements identical to those of birds. Nests arranged in circular patterns with adults positioned over them appear in both groups. Some fossils preserve adults sitting on clutches in brooding posture, arms spread as wings would be. This behavior continues today in nesting birds, protecting eggs, and regulating temperature. The transition from ground-dwelling dinosaur to flying bird occurred gradually. Early forms could not fly, but used feathered limbs for balance and maneuvering. Later species developed stronger chest muscles and lighter skeletons, enabling gliding and eventually powered flight. At no point was there a sudden appearance of a completely new animal. Instead, each generation resembled its ancestors closely while adding small changes. After the extinction event, these bird-like dinosaurs possessed advantages that allowed survival. Small body size required less food, feathers provided insulation during colder conditions. Beaks could process seeds and varied materials available in damaged ecosystems. Flight enabled movement between scattered resources. These traits formed a survival package that large specialized dinosaurs lacked. The idea that dinosaurs vanished therefore arises from classification rather than reality. Scientists separated birds into their own category long before evolutionary relationships were understood. Once the connections became clear, the distinction blurred. Birds are not merely relatives of dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs representing the only lineage that endured. This perspective transforms everyday observation. A bird perched on a wire or walking across pavement demonstrates behaviors rooted in deep prehistory. The same skeletal mechanics that allowed ancient predators to run now power modern wings during flight. The sounds of birds calling echo communication methods developed millions of years ago. Recognizing birds as living dinosaurs alters the meaning of extinction. The event eliminated large terrestrial forms but preserved a smaller, adaptable branch. Instead of total disappearance, it marked a transition from dominance by giant species to survival of compact aerial descendants. The lineage continued, changing ecological role rather than ending entirely. The survival story also explains rapid recovery of ecosystems after the catastrophe. Birds reproduced quickly and spread into new niches. Over time, they diversified into countless forms, occupying habitats from oceans to mountains. Their success demonstrates how evolutionary flexibility can preserve a lineage even through global crisis. Understanding this continuity brings the prehistoric world closer to the present. Dinosaurs are not only objects in stone, but living organisms encountered daily. The difference lies in scale and adaptation, not in identity. The age of dinosaurs did not completely end. It transformed and still persists in the air around us. Once birds were recognized as descendants of dinosaurs, scientists began comparing behavior as carefully as anatomy. The parallels proved just as striking. Many actions once considered uniquely avian appear to be inherited habits rather than new inventions. Nest building, territorial display, and complex vocal communication all have fossil hints within dinosaur species that lived long before modern birds existed. The structure of eggs provides one example. Dinosaur eggshells contain microscopic pores arranged to regulate moisture and oxygen flow, matching bird eggs almost exactly. This design supports incubation by body heat rather than burial in sand. Fossils show adults positioned over clutches with limbs spread outward, a posture identical to brooding birds today. The behavior requires awareness of temperature and careful adjustment of position, suggesting parental attention continued throughout incubation. This means scientists reconstruct entire species from incomplete material. Often, a skeleton represents only a single individual, perhaps not even an adult. Growth changes body proportions dramatically in many dinosaurs, so a juvenile fossil can appear to be a different species. Only when multiple specimens are discovered can these mistakes be corrected. History contains several examples where separate names were later combined once developmental stages became clear. Coloration illustrates another limitation. While pigment structures have been preserved in some feathered fossils, most species left no such record. For them, appearance must be inferred indirectly. Patterns used for camouflage or display remain largely speculative. Two equally plausible reconstructions may differ greatly without definitive evidence to confirm either. The popular image therefore shifts as new discoveries provide rare glimpses of original coloration. Sound represents an even greater mystery. Soft tissues, responsible for vocalization, rarely fossilize. Hollow skull chambers suggest resonance capability, but the exact tones produced cannot be fully determined. Computer models estimate possible frequencies based on size and cavity shape, yet the real calls, once echoing across prehistoric landscapes, are lost. Communication likely played a central role in behavior, but its details remain inaccessible. Movement also contains uncertainty. Bones indicate range of motion, yet muscles determine actual performance. Without preserved muscle mass, scientists estimate strength and speed using modern relatives as comparison. These models improve constantly, but they remain approximations. An animal's true gait, agility, and endurance cannot be observed directly. Footprints provide helpful clues but capture only brief moments of activity. Behavior is the most difficult aspect to recover. A fossil records a position at death, not daily life. Grouping of skeletons may suggest herding or accidental burial. Nesting sites indicate parental care but not full social structure. Predation marks reveal interaction yet not frequency. Scientists combine many separate pieces of evidence to form a coherent interpretation, but certainty is rarely absolute. Geography further complicates understanding. Fossils represent scattered points across vast time spans. Millions of years, separate layers in which different species appear. Ecosystems changed gradually, yet the record captures snapshots rather than continuous footage. Entire transitions may be represented by only a few locations worldwide. Absence of fossils in a region does not guarantee absence of the animal itself. Technology continually reshapes knowledge. Imaging methods now reveal internal bone structures without damaging specimens. Chemical analysis detects trace molecules once invisible. Each advancement reinterprets old discoveries and sometimes contradicts established views. What seems certain today may be revised tomorrow when new techniques uncover hidden data. This evolving picture does not weaken science, but defines it. Paleontology operates by assembling partial evidence into the most consistent explanation available. As new information appears, explanations adapt. Dinosaurs, therefore, exist not as fixed images, but as hypotheses refined over time. The goal is accuracy, even if certainty remains incomplete. Understanding these limits invites humility. The prehistoric world contained complexity equal to modern ecosystems, yet only fragments remain accessible. The colors they displayed in sunlight, the precise sounds they made, and many details of daily interaction may never be known fully. Our reconstructions approach reality but cannot capture it perfectly. Rather than diminishing fascination, this uncertainty enhances it. Each fossil discovery offers a rare message from deep time, incomplete yet meaningful. Together they outline creatures far more dynamic than early interpretations imagined. The challenge lies in accepting that some mysteries will endure even as knowledge expands. As scientific methods improve, the story of dinosaurs becomes clearer in some ways and more uncertain in others. Every new discovery answers a question, but often raises several more. This pattern reflects the nature of studying a world separated from us by tens of millions of years. We interpret traces left behind, yet the living reality that produced them cannot be fully recreated. Soft tissue preservation occasionally provides remarkable insight. Rare fossils have revealed skin impressions, feather outlines, and even remnants of internal structures. In a few cases, proteins have been detected within bone. These findings confirm relationships between species and help reconstruct physiology. However, they also emphasize how exceptional such preservation is. For each specimen revealing delicate details, thousands preserve only fragments. The majority of species will never be known beyond skeletal outlines. Interpretation itself carries limitations. Scientists rely on comparison with modern animals to infer behavior. Birds and reptiles serve as living references because they share ancestry. Yet, no living species perfectly matches a dinosaur's combination of features. When reconstructing posture, feeding style, or social interaction, researchers must choose the closest analogy. Different comparisons can lead to different conclusions, each supported by reasonable evidence, but none completely certain. Changing ideas about posture demonstrate this process. Early reconstructions showed tails dragging and bodies sprawling. Later analysis corrected posture to a horizontal stance. Future discoveries may refine details again, perhaps altering estimates of speed or gait. The bones remain the same, but understanding deepens as methods evolve. Environmental reconstruction faces similar challenges. Sediments indicate climate and vegetation, yet they represent specific locations during limited intervals. Entire regions may remain unexplored or destroyed by geological processes. What appears typical in known formations might have been unusual globally. Our perception of prehistoric ecosystems depends heavily on where fossils happen to be preserved. Public imagination often prefers definite answers, but paleontology rarely provides absolute certainty. A newly discovered species may be described from a single partial skeleton. Years later, additional finds may reveal it was a juvenile stage of a known animal. This does not mean earlier work was careless. It reflects working with incomplete data. Each generation of research builds upon the last, correcting and refining conclusions. The ongoing revision of dinosaur appearance illustrates this clearly. Once portrayed as scaly reptiles, many are now recognized as feathered and active. Future findings may adjust colors, behaviors, or ecological roles further. The goal is not to create a final, unchanging image, but to approach reality as closely as possible using available evidence. Despite uncertainty, the broad outlines are secure. Dinosaurs were diverse, active animals that dominated land ecosystems for millions of years. They interacted with complex environments and evolved into modern birds. The details surrounding daily life, communication, and appearance remain open to discovery. This balance between knowledge and mystery drives continued exploration. Each fossil site acts as a small window into a vanished world. When a skeleton emerges from rock, it carries information about anatomy, growth, and environment. Scientists study these clues carefully, comparing them across continents and time periods. Piece by piece, a larger picture forms, though never completely filled. The inability to know everything does not diminish their significance. Instead, it preserves a sense of wonder. Dinosaurs are understood enough to recognize their place in Earth's history, yet distant enough to invite imagination guided by evidence. Their story is not finished because new discoveries will continue to reshape it. In the end, dinosaurs represent both knowledge gained and mystery remaining. They remind us that the past cannot be perfectly recovered, only interpreted through traces. As technology advances and new fossils appear, understanding will continue to evolve. Some questions may finally be answered, while others will persist indefinitely. The prehistoric world therefore exists partly in certainty and partly in possibility. We know they lived, moved, and interacted across ancient landscapes. We know their descendants still fly overhead. But the exact sounds of their calls, the full range of their colors, and many details of their daily lives will remain beyond reach. Accepting that limit completes the picture, leaving dinosaurs not as fully solved puzzles, but as enduring subjects of discovery.